Shaun of the Dead. The most survivable zombie apocalypse in cinema history unfolds in this British comedy where the undead are slow, containable, and government intervention is remarkably effective. Shaun of the Dead, directed by Edgar Wright and released in 2004, features slow, Romero-style zombies that shamble rather than sprint. The British armed forces respond within 48 hours and achieve full control within 6 months. Infection spreads only through bites, and survivors can hide among zombies by mimicking their movements. 6 months later, zombie survivors are integrated into society as controlled labor. In the real world, this scenario would still be almost impossible for you to survive, because you would have to rely on governments being as competent and decisive as they are in the film, and any delay or misstep in early containment would turn even these easy-mode zombies into an unstoppable national crisis. Zombieland. Columbus's survival rules create a framework for navigating a fast but manageable zombie apocalypse. The film establishes more than 30 survival rules, with rule number 1 being cardio, because slow runners are eliminated first, and endurance matters more than speed. Rule number 2 is double tap, always ensuring zombies are genuinely dead. Rule number 3 warns to beware of bathrooms, since enclosed spaces with single exits are death traps. Rule 22 emphasizes know your way out, by pre-planning escape routes. Rule 18 is limber up to prevent injuries. The zombies are fast, but not overwhelmingly intelligent, and proper weapons maintenance, ammo conservation, and the buddy system significantly raise survival odds. In the real world, most people would ignore strict discipline and physical conditioning, meaning that broken rules, poor fitness, and bad decisions would get you killed long before you could assemble a working Zombieland rulebook. Night of the Living Dead. George A. Romero's 1968 masterpiece traps strangers in a rural farmhouse under siege. Filmed on a budget of $114,000 in Pennsylvania, it features slow zombies that can be killed with headshots. Reanimation is caused by radiation from a Venus probe, and anyone who dies with an intact brain returns as a ghoul. The story unfolds over a single terrifying night, where internal conflict, panic, and bad leadership are as deadly as the zombies outside. Government possessions eventually sweep the countryside and appear to gain control. In a real-world version, you probably would not survive, because most groups under sudden siege fracture exactly the way this one does, turning arguments over escape, resources, and authority into fatal mistakes, while the relentless dead close in from every side. Dawn of the Dead. Zack Snyder's 2004 remake replaces shambling corpses with sprinting horrors. Released in 2004, and starring Ving Rhames and Sarah Polley, it features fast, aggressive zombies, capable of full sprint speeds. Infection from a bite turns victims in under a minute. Zombies show basic problem solving, including reacting to threats and using momentum to smash through barriers. A suburban mall becomes the survivors' temporary stronghold, full of supplies but surrounded on all sides. The final escape attempt ends in implied catastrophe on a zombie-infested island. In a realistic setting, you would almost certainly die because even a single bite or brief mistake during supply runs would doom you, and few people have the training, stamina, or teamwork to maintain discipline against endless sprinting attackers. Train to Busan. A Korean bullet train turns into a mobile death trap. Released in 2016 and directed by Young Sang-ho, Train to Busan features extremely fast zombies who turn within seconds of infection. The train's narrow corridors and sealed cars eliminate safe distance. Survivors discover the infected are nearly blind in darkness and react primarily to sound and motion, exploiting that to move through packed carriages. Meanwhile, the virus spreads across stations faster than the train can outrun it, and selfish passengers repeatedly sacrifice others to protect themselves. In the real world, your chances would be almost zero because public transport is already crowded, exits are limited, and one panicked crowd surge or wrong move in a cramped carriage would trap you between the living mob and the infected, with no realistic escape. 28 days later. The Rage virus transforms people into hyper-aggressive living weapons. Released in 2002 and directed by Danny Boyle, the film shows infected who are technically alive, with full muscle power and extreme stamina. Infection through a single drop of contaminated blood or saliva causes transformation in seconds. Victims sprint, climb, and attack without fear or fatigue until they eventually starve weeks or months later. The sequel, 28 weeks later, reveals scorched earth responses, including firebombing and nuclear strikes. Geographic isolation is the only reliable strategy. In a real-world outbreak, you almost certainly would not survive because one cut, splash, or moment near an infected person would be fatal, and almost nobody has both the foresight and resources to shelter in total isolation for months while a country tears itself apart. Return of the Living Dead. These zombies break every rule that usually gives humans a chance. Released in 1985 and directed by Dan O'Bannon, the film features corpses reanimated by a toxic trioxin gas. They can talk, think, feel pain, and use tools. Headshots do not stop them. Dismembered parts keep moving. They hunt specifically for brains, saying it eases the agony of death. The only confirmed ways to stop them are total incineration, special chemical munitions, or nuclear weapons, and even burning them can release more gas into the atmosphere. In reality, this would be an unwinnable scenario. Ordinary weapons and barricades would fail, municipal services would collapse immediately, and even the military would risk making things worse, leaving civilians like you with no effective way to fight or hide for long. World War Z. World War Z, released in 2013 and starring Brad Pitt, depicts a global pandemic with an infection time of about 12 seconds from bite to full transformation. Zombies operate like a swarm, climbing each other to form living ladders over high walls, and flowing through cities like a tidal wave. They show crude self-preservation by diverting around obstacles and reacting to loud noises. Whole cities and nations fall in hours. A risky strategy that camouflages humans with deadly but curable diseases becomes the only workable defense. In a real-world version, the speed and global connectivity of air travel would guarantee planetary spread before anyone even understood the rules, and unless you had extreme luck, a remote safe location, and early information, you would be swept up in the first or second wave. Army of the Dead. Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, released in 2021, traps the undead inside a walled-off Las Vegas. At the top of the hierarchy are alpha zombies, fast, strong, and capable of planning, negotiating, and organizing others. There is also a zombie queen, horse-riding alphas, and an infected tiger patrolling the ruins. The United States government schedules a tactical nuclear strike to wipe the entire zone. A mercenary heist team enters the city with only a few hours before detonation. In real life, this environment would be unsurvivable for you, because you would face not only hordes of mindless biters, but also intelligent leaders who coordinate ambushes, plus the ticking clock of a nuclear weapon that makes long-term hiding or careful scouting completely impossible. I Am Legend. In I Am Legend, released in 2007, a re-engineered measles virus meant to cure cancer mutates into a pathogen that wipes out most of humanity. Survivors are either dead, immune, or transformed into dark seekers, feral nocturnal creatures that burn in sunlight but possess human-level intelligence. They set traps, test the protagonist's routines, and strike at night in coordinated hunts. The last man in New York must barricade his home and move only during daylight. In a realistic version, almost no one would have his combination of immunity, military training, scientific expertise, and access to supplies. So even if you avoided infection, you would likely be overwhelmed by loneliness, infrastructure collapse, and intelligent predators learning your habits. By the way, if you're enjoying this, I post videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help out. Resident Evil Hive. The first Resident Evil film, released in 2002 and starring Mila Jovovich, unfolds in the Hive, an underground Umbrella Corporation facility where the T-virus leaks into the ventilation system. The Red Queen artificial intelligence floods rooms, drops elevators, and uses gas to kill staff, whose bodies then reanimate as zombies. Lickers, mutated creatures with elongated tongues and wall-climbing ability, add to the threat. Extraction teams are trapped between a murderous AI, sealed blast doors, and ever-growing hordes. In the real world, you would not survive a similar deep underground biolab failure because security protocols, toxic leaks, and automated lockdown systems would kill you or trap you long before you could navigate the maze, hack the AI, and find a path back to the surface. The Sadness. The Sadness, released in 2021, imagines a virus that removes moral inhibitions while leaving victims fully conscious. Infection through bodily fluids turns people into sadistic killers who take pleasure in causing pain. They organize cruelty, use tools, and target survivors in crowded urban spaces like trains, streets, and hospitals. The government crumbles as leadership and emergency workers succumb. Victims are aware of what is being done to them, adding psychological terror. In a real-world outbreak like this, survival would be nearly impossible, because there is no mindless shambler to predict or outrun, only neighbors and strangers who suddenly become inventive sadists. And every public space, from transit to hospitals, would become a hunting ground with no safe authority to turn to. The Last of Us. The Last of Us portrays a cordyceps fungal pandemic that jumps from insects to humans. Within about a day of exposure through bites or contaminated food, hosts lose higher brain functions and become runners. Over time, they evolve into stalkers that lurk and ambush, clickers that use echolocation, and heavily armored bloaters. Fungal growths produce spore-filled environments where breathing unfiltered air is lethal. Civilization collapses into scattered quarantine zones and brutal survivor factions. In a real-world scenario, you would struggle to survive because food chains, air quality, and cities would all be compromised. You would need masks, weapons, community allies, and constant movement. And a single wrong step into a spore-filled basement or dark tunnel could end everything. Dawn Original. Romero's original, Dawn of the Dead, released in 1978, uses a shopping mall fortress as both setting and metaphor. Slow zombies wander the complex, drawn there by residual memory of consumer life. 4 survivors initially secure the mall, enjoying food, weapons, and comfort, but boredom and isolation corrode them. Eventually, a biker gang breaks in, shattering the illusion of safety, and the horde floods inside. The message is that hiding in luxury cannot save you forever. In a realistic version, you would likely die, because large, attractive refuges like malls or big box stores would always draw desperate survivors and looters, which in turn would drag massive zombie crowds to your door, turning your safe haven into a siege you cannot sustain indefinitely. Rec. The Spanish found footage film Rec, released in 2007, traps a television crew and residents inside a quarantined Barcelona apartment building. After an infected girl attacks firefighters, authorities seal the structure from the outside, refusing to let anyone leave. The infection spreads floor by floor as panicked residents try to hide or escape. The protagonists discover a penthouse lab where a girl was subjected to Vatican experiments linking demonic possession and a virulent disease. By the end, there is no way out and no rescue. In a real-world apartment lockdown with a fast-spreading pathogen, you probably would not survive because stairwells, elevators, and cramped flats turn the entire building into a vertical maze of infection with no safe exit and no outside help. Warm Bodies. Warm Bodies, released in 2013, reimagines zombies as emotionally dormant rather than permanently lost. R, a zombie, slowly regains his humanity after forming a connection with a living girl named Julie. As his heart figuratively and literally warms, others begin to reverse their condition, while fully decayed bonies remain irredeemable predators. Human survivors live behind walls, venturing out on risky missions. In reality, you should not count on love curing a neurological infection. If anything like a zombie pathogen emerged, waiting for feelings to turn predators back into people would get you killed quickly, and attempting to befriend an infected stranger would be the least survivable strategy imaginable. Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, released in 2016, places undead hordes into Regency-era England. The Bennett sisters train in martial arts and weapons at Shaolin and in Japan, returning as elite fighters in corsets and combat boots. Upper-class estates fortify themselves and hold training balls, while the poor remain exposed. Some zombies can temporarily pass as civilized by eating pig brains instead of human ones. Wickham hides his undead nature through a controlled diet. In the real world, this kind of apocalypse would be nearly impossible for you to survive because it assumes years of formal combat training, access to weapons, and privileged safe zones. Most people today lack both the discipline and social position those characters enjoy. Fido. Fido, released in 2006, imagines a 1950s suburb after a past zombie war. ZomCon's control collars suppress zombie aggression, turning the undead into butlers, gardeners, and pets for wealthy families. When one collar malfunctions, a localized outbreak reminds the town how fragile that control really is. Security forces quickly move in, but corporate interests prioritize image over honesty. In our world, any technology that turns dangerous creatures into cheap labor would be pushed to its limits. Maintenance would be uneven, and a single systemic failure could instantaneously flip domestic helpers back into predators. Unless you controlled the tech and lived in the most protected neighborhoods, you would be on the front line when the collars fail. Dead Alive. Peter Jackson's Dead Alive, also known as Brain Dead, is a splatter comedy where a Sumatran rat monkey's bite infects a domineering mother, causing contagious zombification. The infection escalates inside a single house until dozens of decomposing party guests fill the property. Protagonist Lionel tries to contain the outbreak, culminating in a legendary lawnmower massacre scene that sprays gore across the screen. The tone is absurd, but the infection spreads through bites and fluids as relentlessly as any serious zombie film. In reality, you could not replicate Lionel's cartoonish survivability. One slip on blood-slick floors, one broken weapon, or one uncontained corpse in a real neighborhood would spread the disease far beyond a single house, and no one owns the plot armor required to clean it up alone. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you don't miss future uploads. Thanks for watching.